Hello and welcome to week 4 of NMP 650. I'm recording this on Sunday, so the week 4 module has already opened. I'm apologize for not having gotten this video in place prior to the opening of the week 4 module, but nevertheless, here we are on Sunday and you're finishing up presumably the work of week 3, and specifically today you're finishing up your introduction chapters to your capstones, and those are being submitted tonight. So what I want to do really quickly is just do a little recap of week 3. You were discussing the human resources framework, Bowman and Dale's human resources frame. And first of all, I want to thank you all for bringing your own experiences to the discussions and your own thoughts and reflections on your experiences. They make these discussions much richer, and I think in some cases it helps to illuminate the points for some of your fellow classmates as well. Just a word today is the middle of July, and it's extremely hot outside. No rain in the forecast, so you may hear the air conditioning unit coming on and off during the course of this recording. Apologize for that, but nevertheless important. Back to the human resources frame. So the big takeaway from the human resources frame is, as with the structural frame, it's all about the balance. But in terms of the human resources frame, here the balance is about expectations and form being in balance with freedom and a loosening of the bounds or more autonomy. So the balance is about advocacy and inquiry. You can kind of put that down in your thought bank. Advocacy and inquiry. In other words, asking and really listening to the input that you get from staff, volunteers, board members, donors. In this case, we're talking about primarily volunteers, staff, and board members too, I get, in that instance as well. So asking and really listening to the responses that you get back in order to better align the wants and the needs of those staff members or those volunteers or those board members with the goals of the organization. That's really the balance here, so that the ability to really understand their point of view and make sure for clarity that when I say understand, I'm not necessarily talking about agree with. I'm talking about see the situation through the lens of their point of view, so that you can hopefully see some alignment or be able to align the goals of the organization with the wants and the needs of the people. We talked about the fact that the people are one of the biggest assets for any nonprofit organization, whether it's paid staff, whether it's volunteers, whether it's donors, board members. So in order for all that to work together, you need to make sure that those wants and needs are aligned with the goals of the organization. And in particular, because you're in a leadership position, to understand when you need to be advocating for their point of view, but always within the context of the goals or the mission of the organization. And that may mean managing expectations. So that understand that the human resources frame is not all about giving them what they want, everything that they want. That's not the point. How people feel about the organization, how they feel about the work of the organization, and especially how they feel about how their work contributes to the outcome or the course of the mission of the organization, the impact of the mission, Those are the key elements to be in balance: how they feel about the organization, how they feel about the work of the organization, and especially how they feel about their part in the organization accomplishing its mission. That's key. That's the key to productivity. You began to see in the American Red Cross case study these two frameworks working in balance with one another, so as to support that it's not ever one particular framework at play. It's usually a mixture of some or all of four of them. Usually it's not four, but some of the four. And a reminder that it's not that you need to agree with their point of view. It's that you need to understand it and see the situation through their point of view. It's not that you need to change their mind about their point of view. It's in order for you to be able to advocate for their point of view if it is in the best interests of the organization and the organization's mission, or to manage their expectations if it is not. So that's a great segue into the work of week 4, which is the political framework. I will tell you straight off that often in this class, the political framework is the one that everyone dreads talking about because they equate political with politics, and they are not the same thing, not at all. So the term politics, the word politics has a negative connotation. So if you can kind of put that aside and really understand that what we're talking about here are forming coalitions, forming alliances, and that this can be an extraordinarily productive way to get those elements into alignment that we were just talking about. And so your understanding of the political framework is really all about how effective you as a leader are in a group setting. Again, that notion of really listening and really advocating for a particular point of view, or trying to establish a situation in which those two are in balance with one another. So I would direct you to the Bowman and Deal definition of political, which is that it's all about the distribution of scarce resources. And I'm sure you would agree that here in the nonprofit sector, it's all about scarce resources. That's what is dealt with most often. So it's about the distribution of those scarce resources. Who gets what for their programs, or who gets what for how that those resources are used to achieve the mission of the organization. When resources become scarce, and those resources can be financial, they can be personnel, or they can be opportunities, organizational opportunities. Which opportunities should the organization pursue? And when you get those in conflict with one another, then issues do arise, as I'm sure you're all very aware in your own situations. And it's up to the leader to sort that out and to manage those situations and those expectations. Agendas surface, and they reflect, usually agendas will reflect where the power base is. It's very important as a leader for you to be able to identify where the power base is so that you can understand where you as the leader are, on which side of that power base. Are you part of it? Are you not part of it? And where are the agendas? And which side of it are you going to advocate for, and which side of it are you going to need to manage a little differently? The case study this week is a great example of building coalitions. That's the big takeaway from this week's case study, is for you to see that element of building coalitions in practice. Coalitions are the key to solving those issues of the distribution of scarce resources. And to have a satisfactory outcome that really, if not satisfies everyone, at least there is a satisfactory outcome for most, and certainly the organization. Usually when you have two power bases in conflict, you need to determine, you as the leader need to determine where the power really resides, so that you are better able to manage that situation. You understand which side of the power you reside, and where you think the organization's best interests are in those struggles. It's a point of view, and you need to understand which point of view you as the leader need to advocate for. Most importantly, it's up to you as the leader to provide the structure for negotiation, to provide a structure within which two sides, or if it's more than two sides, but in this case, I'm just going to give you the example of two sides. It's up to you as the leader to provide the safe negotiating place for that process to occur. Usually, it's within some sort of a neutral structure that will allow both points of view the opportunity to advocate for their point of view and to arrive at a solution or an outcome that is at least satisfactory for all sides. So that's really the political frame. I look forward to your discussions this week. You begin this week the serious work on your literature review. There's a lot about, in the resources for this week, about academic writing and the beginnings of writing about literature reviews in particular. Just a look ahead into week 5. This week, in week 4, there is no written assignment. Please do not think of this as a week off, because at the end of week 5, next week, the formal draft of your literature review will be due at the end of week 5. And just some minimum expectations for that is that you will be, the literature review will discuss a minimum of 10 peer-reviewed articles and be a minimum of 10 pages long, excluding your title and your resource list. So that's a significant piece of work here in NMP 650. So you need to really make sure that you have started it by now. To that end, there will be no reading in the Bowman and Deal next week in week 5. So we will be taking a break from the Bowman and Deal in week 5. Next week, I really want you to focus on finishing up the literature review chapter of your capstone. By the end of this week, we will be halfway through NMP 650, and presumably by the end of this week, you will have in hand your introduction chapter and your literature review of your capstone, 2 big pieces of the 4 chapters that I promised you that you would exit 650 having done. A quick note about the literature review: it is not a summary of everything you've read. Rather, it is a narrative, if you will, of what you've read. I want you to, as it were, to really weave a narrative about what you read, where they agreed, where they disagreed, where there's still a research. They note that research is still to be done. The relationships, in other words, that each piece of literature that you're choosing to put in your literature review, I want to understand how they fit together. What are their relationships to one another? And how do they relate to your topic area and specifically your research question? Big letters. In the literature review, there is no analysis. You should come to no conclusions in your literature review. It is strictly a narrative about what you read, what they say, where they agree, where they disagree, and how it relates to your topic area and your research question. That's really it for my notes. I've gone longer than I thought I was going to. Sorry about that. Let me know where your questions are. We're in week 4, so by the end of this week, we're halfway through. Hope you're doing well. I know it's a lot of work, and I can just support your feeling that this week and next are heavy-duty weeks. By the time you finish at the end of next week and you hand in that literature review, you're going to breathe a very big sigh of relief. So, good. Hope you're staying cool. Hope it rains soon. Thanks a lot. See you online.